Professor Ivara Isu, OFRO, Deputy Governor of Cross River State, at a one-day symposium organized by the State Ministry of Justice in conjunction with the Conference of Western Attorneys, Attorney Generals, Africa Alliance Partnership. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to this scenic and tourism city of Calabar, the Cross River State capital. To us, the conference offers a unique opportunity to interface with global actors in government, legal icons, law enforcement officers, human rights activists, and bureaucrats who are expected to deliberate on the trading term of investigation and prosecution of transnational crime wildlife trafficking. As we all know, wildlife trafficking has become one of the global challenges which is unfortunately defying national and subnational interventions. This is understandable considering the fact that the illegal business is a multi-dollar spinner. Your choice of Cross River State to host this international discourse is not a coincidence. It is apt considering the underlisted parameters. First and foremost is the fact that our dear state harbors 58% of the last remaining tropical rainforest in Nigeria. Secondly, Cross River is listed as one of the 25 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Thirdly, the state is rich in wildlife, harboring several species of primates, such as the drill monkeys, the Cross River gorilla, chimpanzee, etc. It is consequent upon above high-profile biodiversity that our state has left no stone unturned in advancing frontiers of conservation of wildlife. Cross River State government has been in the forefront in conservation matters since 1912, when the colonial masters put in place forestry ordinance for the control and preservation of forests and animals in eastern Nigeria. This ordinance was the pivot upon which current Cross River State Forestry Commission Law 2011 was anchored. Our state is also hosting the Cross River National Park, which is one of the Nigerian conservation arenas. The state-rich forest and biodiversity is also responsible for the selection as a pilot state to drive UN Red Plus program. Today, the Red Plus program is at the verge of transition to the investment phase, having concluded the readiness phase and a REST strategy developed. Let me comment on the Cross River State Ministry of Justice initiating this global collaboration, which is intended to address issues bordering on prosecution as far as wildlife trafficking and the global level is concerned. We must all together rise up to protect our endangered species, which are facing threats of extinction. We must all realize that our local and national international borders lines are mere human creations. Animals have no regard to geographical enclaves or boundaries. As I encourage you to have a very robust engagement on the subject matter, let me place on record some of the milestones which Cross River State has so far achieved. The Cross River State Forestry Commission has been created and accorded legal backing to regulate and sustainably manage the state forest resources. The Cross River State Forestry Commission has also powers to checkmate illegal wildlife trafficking, locally and internationally. Several forest reserves are in existence across the length and breadth of the state. Cross River State is partnering with world-leading non-governmental organizations to protect its wildlife resources, especially primates. The Afi Wildlife Mountain Sanctuary is one of the state collaboration programs aimed at protecting the state-rich fauna species. In spite of our impressive scorecard in wildlife conservation, we are confronted with the following challenges. 1. Enforcement of relevant laws has continued to be our nightmare due to activities of illegal poachers and loggers. Delays in prosecution of offenders has continued to make transnational crime attractive. The state requires international support to ensure continued conservation of wildlife and to combat offenders. This support can be financial, material, or both. Harmonization of bylaws with the existing laws. We have to recognize, support, and provide enabling enforcement for the ability of communities to benefit from conservation and sustainable use of wildlife as means to combat wildlife trafficking. It is also essential that policymakers should evaluate institutions and laws that are geared towards addressing the international animal trafficking. I wish you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you and God bless.
Please, another round of applause for him. It's very important that we know we have the full support of the government of Cross River State, even in organizing and participating in this program. And this bodes well for the deliverables from the program. It means that we all go here, even being good ambassadors in this area of fighting wildlife trafficking and creating awareness about the transnational crimes and their ill effects on the society. Because all of them, wildlife trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, they are all part of transnational crime. And we have seen how it affects the society. Even though millions and billions of dollars and naira are generated from this illicit trade, none of them affects the society in a good way, because really taxes are not derivable from them because they are illicit activities, so the revenues are usually hidden, and few individuals that engage in this make away with all the revenue they get. So we go away from here at least with all the deliverables, that we are able to go out there being good ambassadors in the fight against all forms of transnational crimes, because as it affects Nigeria, it's also affecting the United States, it's also affecting all the countries in Africa. Thank you so much. Mr. Honorable Betty Obi, who is the Chairman, Forestry Commission, representing the Deputy Governor of Cross River State. Thank you so much, sir. So we'll move quickly to the next presentation, after which we'll be able to take our questions and answer. I know we have been receiving some questions written down. Please, if you don't want to forget your question, you can write it and pass across to me, and I will ensure that the right person gets it, so that during the panel discussion, everything will be taken together. Everything will be taken together during the panel discussion, all the questions that have been asked. This is to ensure that we make good on our time. So to take the next presentation will be a representative of Alhaji Ibrahim Musa Goni of the National Park Service. Alhaji Ibrahim Musa Goni was appointed the Conservator General of the National Park Service in 2017 after over 3 decades of meritorious service in the field of conservation and protected area management. He holds a B.Ed Biology from Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto in 1990, and M.Tech, Masters in Technological Agriculture in Wildlife Management from Federal University of Technology, Akure in 2000. He has attended several national and international workshops and conferences, notably among which are training on effective delegation and leadership at the Administrative Staff College of Nigeria, ASCON, in July 2008. He was a member, Nigerian observer, to the Conference of Party COP10 on the review of the Convention on Biodiversity, Nagoya, Japan, in October 2010. Conference of the Botanical Society of Nigeria, July 2010 also, and Second World Biodiversity Congress, Kuching, Sarawak, in Malaysia in 2011. He was also a member Nigerian delegation to the Conference on Sustainable Development held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in June 2012. He was also on a study tour to some national parks in Niger State, study tour to the Indian National Parks 2012, and also a member Nigerian delegation on the study tour of the Kenya National Park, amongst other tours. He was conferred with the title of Kogunan Bogo by His Royal Highness Alhaji Dr. Senator Haliru Dantoro Kitoro III, the Emir of Bogo, Niger.
Good afternoon, distinguished participants in this very, very important symposium. I want to very specially thank the organizers of this very symposium, and also to convey the apology of the Conservator General of National Park Service for his inability to come here in person. We would have loved to be here because this is a very, very critical, important symposium that affects our own area of service. But for his very tight schedule at Abuja, he's unable to come in person, so he has directed me to come and represent him. I am Richard Edet Efa, the Assistant Conservator General in charge of Park Planning, Research and ICT, headquarters Abuja. Maybe to quickly correct the facilitator, I heard her say Mr. and Tufam. I think Tufam is, when you use Tufam, you don't need to use Mr. because Tufam is chief. But we are not for that here, please. If we look at the topic here, what we have done in the National Park Service is that we have tried to look at the effort we have done over the years in wildlife trafficking and trade across the country, across the borders, and across the region. But in doing so, the paper I'm going to present, I'll quickly draw us to the perspective of global wildlife trafficking. Then we will talk about this trafficking in the region, maybe West Africa. We also narrow it to how it affects Nigeria. And at the end of it, we now highlight what we as a service have done over the years to protect and also control illegal wildlife in the country. What is wildlife? Wildlife refers to all animal and plants that exist in their natural habitat. This includes, but not limited to, animals like lion, elephant, blue duiker, corp, primates, etc., etc. It includes also various species of insects, reptiles, fish, microorganisms, and birds, as well as plants. Importance of wildlife. The scope of wildlife is vast, and therefore is no possible way to discuss the importance of such contributor to the ecological system as a whole. The most important lesson to take away from this is that without wildlife, human life would be meaningless. Wildlife species are very important in the life of any nation, as they provide opportunity for recreation, tourism, employment, foreign exchange, edible fruits, medicinal plants, soil conservation, and animal protein. Human uses at least 40,000 different plants, animal, fungi, bacteria, and various species of wildlife for food, clothing, shelter, medicine, and this very research is done by one Abubakar in 2010. The relationship between wildlife and the continuous balance of ecosystem, population, and communities can be summarized as follows. The clothes we wear comes from cotton and other plant fiber and manufactured into wearable items. The food we eat obviously comes from animal and plants. The houses we live, the resources come from the plants. The paper we are using also is a product of plants, and the air we breathe. Medicine would be reduced to a chemical synthesis lab project that are considered unsafe for consumption, if not for wildlife. What we are trying to say is that without plants, whatever we talk about medicine is not possible. Then wildlife in Nigeria. Nigeria occupies a unique geographic position in Africa, and the variability in climate and geographic features endows her with one of the richest biodiversity in the continent. The diversity of natural ecosystem ranges from semi-arid savanna to mountain forests, rich seasonal floodplain environment, rainforest, vast freshwater swamp forests, and diverse coastal vegetation. Nigeria's Niger Delta contains the largest tract of mangrove in Africa. A country report published in 1992 by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency indicates that Nigeria possesses more than 5,000 recorded species of plants, 22,000 species of animals, including insects, and 889 species of birds, and 489 species of microorganisms. It is estimated that 4% of the plant species are threatened, 8.5% endangered, while 14% of the animals and insects are also threatened. The country study listed 135 reptiles species, 109 amphibian species, 648 fish species, and recognized the forest in Cross River State of Nigeria to be the hotspot for amphibian biodiversity. Nigeria is known as a global hotspot for primate species, with a great diversity found especially in the Gulf of Guinea of Cross River Forest. Some of the endemic species include some species of primates we have here: the white-throated monkey, the Columbus, and other species of birds. The most endangered gorilla subspecies on Earth, the Cross River gorilla, with an estimated population of less than 250 individuals, is found only in a couple of protected areas in Cross River State. Now, let's further go to the threat of wildlife in Nigeria. Man's interplay with biosphere arises because he wants to satisfy the economic needs. The population has increased by more than 2,000 times since the beginning of agriculture. Consequently, large areas of world landscape have been completely transformed to provide the needed land for growing food and housing. Forests have been cut down, wetland drained, and desert irrigated, reducing this natural habitat to a fraction of their former extent of some wildlife species and have been managed to adapt to these changes. While others have gone to extinction, the list of threatened species globally includes 148 animals and 146 plants. After are found in Nigeria, of these 26 animals and 18 plants are classified as endangered, and another 3 and 15 plants are critically endangered worldwide. Natural and man-made threats, socio-cultural problems, as well as direct and indirect consequences of socio-economic development have contributed to the loss of wildlife resources at all levels. Within the last 25 years, it is believed that about 43% of the forest ecosystem has been lost through human activities. Nigeria, with a population of over 180 million people, constitutes nearly a quarter of the total population of Sub-Saharan Africa. The population growth rate of more than 3% and increasing poverty has put severe demand on the country's natural resources. The institutional structure and the resource available to manage them, there has been a general institutional weakness and lack of technical capacity to effectively tackle the nation's environmental issues, including wildlife illegal trade. Evidence has, however, shown that status of Nigerian wildlife at present is that of depleted resources. The threat is always related to disappearance of the forest habitat in which these species are being threatened by extinction. Poaching, illegal trade, and indiscriminate hunting are all inclusive. A study by Nathaniel and Nathaniel in 2001 gave example of the Nile crocodile, which was once found in the Nigeria coastal waters right up to Lake Chad, as fast disappearing due to loss of habitat and hunting of crocodile. Also in southern part of the country, the forest elephant, chimpanzee, leopard, and royal python are among the animals on the endangered list. In fact, here in Cross River National Park, you can see that we have very, very limited number of elephants. And it is believed that most of these elephants migrate from the Republic of Cameroon. And we have up till now not actually been able to give the actual number of elephants within this zone. Forest experts have equally reported that about 65% of species of trees are now faced with extinction, while many others are at different stage of risks. For some wildlife species, the combination of the above factors, including illegal trade, have proved to so damaging that their number in Nigeria are presently below the level that can guarantee their future survival. Most of these trade, most of this disappearance, extinction, mostly as a result of illegal trafficking. And when there's illegal trafficking, there'll be high demand for poaching. The present status of wildlife in Nigeria therefore calls for urgent action so as to conserve them for the use of the present generation while maintaining their potential for generation yet unborn. Let's us now talk about the overview general of illegal wildlife trafficking. Wildlife trafficking, poaching, and illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife products is one of the largest black markets in the world, measuring billions of dollars a year. It threatens the survival of iconic species such as elephant, rhinos, tigers, sharks, sea turtle, and as well as the security of nations and regions, economic development, and environmental health. Recently, however, the exponential increase in demand for products such as ivory horn, tiger part has created market lucrative enough to attract international network. We are talking here because most of this wildlife that are being trafficked across the borders, in some parts of Africa, their parts are used for very, very important cultural issues, and therefore it it is high. That is why the demand for all this becomes very, very high. And because there is no free road for them to pass, they have to traffic and enforcement. Porous borders, corruption, etc., etc. These networks are violent and sophisticated, operating without concern for the harm they inflict on local communities, on the dangerous groups financed by the sale of wild product. We have all observed that there is an international criminal network that engage in this illegal trafficking, and that is why the market is still surviving. We may not know those behind this very network, but the locals who are engaged, who are the primary people who are engaged directly in trafficking, are those always found liable. Poaching of endangered species to fit the illicit global trade of wildlife, estimated to worth between 8 and 10 billion per year, including fisheries and timber, is rising at an alarming rate. This research is done by Lawson and Vine in 2014. It's a recent research. Activity in the illegal ivory trade has more than doubled since 2007 and is over 3 times larger than it was during the last peak in 1998, with the street value of about $2,205 per kilogram. More than on the Chinese black market, Lawson also said that elephant and rhinos are most prominent among the animals being killed to fit rising demand for the tusks and horns across the world. And this is why the former U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, described the illegal wildlife trade in 2012 as a global challenge that spans continents and crosses oceans. This trade can no longer be viewed exclusively as an environmental concern, although the trafficking of live animal and animal product remain a very conservative issue. This crime threatens the stability and security of societies involved at every point along the chain. It was the rise in illegal wildlife trade that prompted Mrs. Clinton to describe the phenomenon as a national security issue, a public health issue, an economic security issue. 3 things he pointed out: that because of this illegal trade of trafficking of wildlife, these are 3 issues that are very, very devastating to any national economy. Across Africa, elephants and rhinos are being targeted by poachers and armed non-state actors, including rebel movements such as the Lord's Resistance Army, to satisfy increasing demand from growing middle class across the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, where ivory product and rhino horns are considered status symbol and used as ingredients in traditional medicine. Meanwhile, transnational organized crime group and armed non-state actors are able to exploit institutional weakness, civil conflict, and legislative loopholes in both source of consumer countries to feed this rising demand for rare commodities, acquiring vast profit. We can see that at this point we are talking about weak legislative issues, because the laws presently in the country are so weak that it encourages this illegal trafficking. Because for instance, when you kill an elephant, maybe the law provides that you should pay very little sum of money and perhaps go to jail for about 1 or 2 years, and that is enough. So as we progress further, we will now start to see that there is need for us to overhaul our legal system so that stringent measures and punishment will be meted to these traffickers. It is a discordance between national legislation and institutional capacity for implementation on one hand, and multilateral environmental agreements such as the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, CITES, on the other hand, means that national legislation often remains inadequate to support this initiative, protect endangered species, and regulate cross-border trade. Attempts have been made to enhance support for implementation of national wildlife regulations, such as the creation of the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime. However, regulations stipulating which animal product can be largely traded vary greatly by country, resulting in parallel legal and illegal trade. The legal trade in wildlife product is estimated at about 300 billion per year, a figure that can obscure the lesser but still significant value of illegal trade. This is a research also conducted by Lawson in 2014. Just as important as the devastating effects on biodiversity is the evidence that the illegal wildlife trade erodes state authority and fuels civil conflicts, threatening national stability and provoking substantial economic losses internationally. But the true scale of this unknown as its indirect cost in security and political implication. Restricting an analysis other global implication of environmental crime to biodiversity conservation limit the focus of wildlife and supply. The illegal wildlife trade involves poachers, armed non-state actors from source nations, international crime groups, and institutional corruption across global network, and a range of players involved in demand countries. If there is no high demand for all this product, you can see that there will be nothing like illegal trade. To combat the trade, leaders in the international community, especially from supply and demand countries, need to collectively expand and deepen their level of cooperation. That is why we are talking of this sort of symposium. If we cooperate with our neighbors like Cameroon, I think we will bring drastically the trade for this illegal trafficking. The impact of illegal wildlife trade generally now. The world is dealing with an unprecedented spike in illegal wildlife trade, threatening to overturn decades of conservation gains. Ivory estimated to weigh more than 23 metric tons, a figure that represents about 2,500 elephants, was seized in the 13th largest seizure of illegal ivory in 2011. Poaching threatened the last of world's wild tigers that numbers about 3,890. Wildlife crime is a big business. It involves trafficking of wildlife and animal parts like illegal drugs and arms, and runs by dangerous international network, which in turn causes social and ecological impact, as well as indirect impact. Most of us who are here in Cross River, I think, let's just reflect our mind to about 2 or 3 months ago, when a large seizure of snakes from a neighboring country was used and attempted to pass through as a transit through Cross River. That is because our borders are very, very weak. So I am happy that my colleagues from the Immigration Service are here, so that they'll be able to go back and discuss on how our borders can be well protected. Then what are the social impacts of wildlife trafficking? It harms human livelihoods, it compromises security, it alters livelihood, and high profit margin. And this is what is making them. Because you go to Cameroon, you go to Niger, you go to maybe Benin Republic, and try to traffic something that you maybe buy in very few safers. When you pass through a porous border nation like our own, before you know what is happening, the person is already counting billions of dollars. Demand drives crime. It is because of the high demand, and that is why this trade will continue to persist. We must make effort as professionals to discourage this high demand. And then public nuisance, gaps in protection. Yes, we the conservationists too, we must also accept that there are also gaps in our protection activities. ecological impact of wildlife trade. The balance of nature. In addition, that is it harms the balance of nature. It threatens extinction of particular species and introducing of invasive species and incidental destruction of non-targeted species and interruption of nature generally. Then let's talk about wildlife trade in Nigeria due to illegal wildlife species being threatened. Well, I have few of them here, things like pangolin, which already has been mentioned by my professional colleague from NCF. We have African parrot, we have chimpanzee, rosewood, elephant, gorillas, and others, etc. But those are what the few I've mentioned here. And a reconnaissance survey of bushmeat trade in 8 border communities of Cross River State in 2009 revealed an active and thriving bushmeat trade between Cross River State in Nigeria and neighboring communities in Cameroon. A total of 2,961 carcasses belonging to at least 30 animal species were traded as bushmeat, with species such as porcupine, dowkias, and monkey being the commonest. The survey also revealed that a number of endangered and fully protected species such as gorilla, chimpanzee, drills, and others were being openly traded in some communities market of the both countries. For most of you who are around Cross River, if you move through the Oban-Ekang axis, you go to a community like Aningeje, go there on Saturday and see what is happening. Then we move further to the Boki axis. All those communities that are bordering the Cameroon, Tagamanda National Park, just go there and see what is happening. Then you'll be able to, it's be a very sorry situation. We have, in fact, we have a list attached in this, a list of endangered species. Then, tackling illegal wildlife trade around the world. That one we have actually said something about. For want of time, I may not be able to repeat that again. But I want also to emphasize here that organizations like Fauna and Flora International are in the forefront of tackling this wildlife trade around the world. Let us see those strategies to reduce wildlife trade. And if we look at the USAID invested about 67 million in the fiscal year 2015 today here, up from 13 million they invested in 2012 in activities to combat wildlife trafficking by fighting poaching, improving enforcement and prosecution, disrupting transit, and reducing consumer demand in Africa and Asia. That is, this report came out 2018, you said. More than 65 projects in 25 countries advance the National Strategy for Combating Wildlife Trafficking and Associated Strategy Implementation Plan, which mobilize resources and coordination to address these important challenges. Recent results of USAID and other U.S. government efforts are highlighted in the 2015 National Strategy Progress Assessment. What are those strategies? We are talking here about effective anti-poaching, both national and regional. We are talking about law enforcement and prosecution. We, the wildlife experts, we, the wildlife manager, must be seen to be very serious with the enforcement. But like I said earlier, the law itself, the act, our Cap 65 Law of Federation of Nigeria 2010 as amended, is a little bit very weak. And I think the representative from the Federal Ministry of Justice, they are aware that we are making effort to review that law so that stringent measures could be included in that law so that wildlife trade will become a very big crime. It is our belief in the service that by the time the document goes to National Assembly for debate, when it comes out, more stringent laws will be effected. Then demand reduction. We must be seen to reduce demand for some of this wildlife. Private sector partnership. Apart from the managers of wildlife, I think we need to go beyond that. Then other innovations. Yes, the convention on, let us talk a little bit about the convention for illegal trade on wildlife endangered species, that is CITES. We know that we were one of the countries that actually were signatory to this law, to this convention that came into force on the 11th of February 1974. And it was domesticated here in 1st July 1975. But something happened in the country 2005 and we were suspended. But the good news is that on the 26th of August 2011, we were also readmitted. But as a country, but I think it is the NESDRA that is empowered to really enforce the CITES while protecting wildlife, while saving endangered species. Rate of endangerment and extinction have increased rapidly in concert with human population growth. Though accelerating habitat loss and extinction rates are hallmark of the modern biodiversity crisis, the link between human enterprise and species extinction has existed for almost 100,000 years, during which time Australia, the America, and the world's island lost 74 to 86% of their animal larger than 44 kg. In North and South America, the disappearance of numerous large animals, including extraordinary species like mammoths and armored glidons, coincided with the arrival of significant population of humans between 11,000 and 13,000 years ago. More than 7,000 vertebrate animals, including about 160 species of birds and 100 mammals, have become extinct since 16,000 AD. So you can see we are in a very serious stage. Now, they need to protect or conserve these wildlife species. Why do we have to conserve them? We are talking of environmental education. We are talking of our national heritage. We are talking of promoting of our tourism, which I've already mentioned. We are also talking of our medicinal research. We are talking of revenue generation. If you conserve this wildlife, I think it may become one of our revenue generating points. In some South and East Africa, wildlife conservation is the mainstay of their national economy. But here in our own country, we are always talking of oil, oil, oil. If we develop this sector, I think we can diversify in that area. Then employment opportunities. So I have dwelled much on the wildlife trade, the wildlife within protected area that I've said. Let us see how it works in how the effort we have done in National Park. For those who may be hearing about National Park Service for the first time, permit me to really just give a rundown of what National Park Service is. As it is a National Park is a relatively large area of land, stroke sea, where one or several ecosystems are materially unaltered, minimally altered by human exploitation or occupation, where the plant and animal species, morphological sites, and habitat are of scientific, educational, recreational interest. The highest competent legal authority of the country is in control, which is the federal government. Visitors are allowed to enter under specific conditions for spiritual, educational, cultural, and recreational purposes. Then historical perspective of creation of the national park. The advent of national park started in 1979 with the creation of Kanji Lake National Park. That was the first premier national park. And that was through the Decree 46 as a premier. Then for about 12 years, Kanji Lake National Park remained the only park in Nigeria until 1999. when Act of 46 of 1970 was promulgated and replaced with Decree 36. And more national parks were then created. We had the Gashaka, Oloyo, Chad Basin, Cross River, and National Park. In 1992, Yankari, that has gone back again to the state government, came in as an executive order, and it became a national park. But in 2006, the Bauchi state government actually made a very strong case to take back the Yankari National Park. So it's now the Yankari Game Reserve, and you can see that the monument status has changed. And we also should be able to ask ourselves the status of Yankari Game Reserve when it was the federal government and when it is now managed with the state by the state government. Those who are familiar with this, I think it's a very sorry situation. Then we have a table here that really tells us the locations of these national parks. We have 7 national parks spread across different ecological zones. And for Kamoku, it's Guinea Savannah, and it has an area of about 1,211. For Kainji Lake, it's Guinea Savannah also in Niger State. Kamoku is in Kaduna State. It has an area of 5,382. Then we have Oloyo National Park, an area of 2,512 in Oyo State. Dry Forest, Guinea Savannah. And Okomo is in Edo State, 202 square kilometers, lowland rainforest. And Cross River, 4,000 square kilometers, lowland rainforest. And then Gashaka Agumti, Guinea Savannah, and Montaigne. Then Yobo State is Sahel Savannah. Let's see what the effort we have made. We just captured only last year. The reason is that the information we got to present this paper, in fact, we're presenting this paper maybe 24 hours or 36 hours on information. So what we did was that just to tell the audience the effort we have made, we just captured only last year report. If you look at the table, you find out that for last year, the effort we made a total arrest of 497, and then we treated 148 in the court, and 196 cases were compounded because our act empowers us to compound offenses. And we released and 184. Then we still have 8 pending cases in all our parks, and 57 were sent to jail. So that is the effort we have made for last year. If we had time to actually bring 5-year report, you can see that we are making tremendous effort towards protection of wildlife, the resources. Let me. With this, we are now, for want of time, we are now saying, what with all this that is happening across the regional borders, across the country, across the world, what do we do to really reduce this impact of wildlife trafficking? We said that we should encourage government to protect threatened animal population by increasing law enforcement, imposing strict deterrence, reducing demand for endangered species product, and honoring international community trade under CITES. Like I said, how do you reduce demand? You reduce demand. There are so many areas that we can reduce demand. And when the prices of all these endangered species or animals that are being trafficked is very high, and the penalties are very stringent, you find out that the trade will drop drastically. You don't need anybody to tell you. If you know that if you go and kill one endangered species somewhere and you try to illegally traffic it, and it's going to give you 10 years imprisonment, I think you'll be very careful. So that is the area we are talking. Speak up on behalf of those on the front lines being threatened by armed poachers so that they are properly equipped, trained, and compensated. Reduce demand for illegal wildlife parts and products by encouraging others to ask questions and get the fact before buying any wildlife or plant product. Government need to develop the political will to institutionalize routine awareness, create programs for stakeholders. Stakeholders is very important in this aspect because, like we used to say, we, the wildlife managers, we really have to work with the stakeholders, especially the communities, because they own the forest. They know where they know all the illegal routes they can traffic all this wildlife. If we work in partnership with them, you can see that we can have very encouraging result. The government should expose and close key hotspots and routes where every and other wildlife are illegally trafficked. Special ports for wildlife trade should be designated. Any wildlife resources arriving at any other societies by wildlife